You're tuned in to HorrorSlop, where the stories are rotting, truth is twisted, and sleep, forget about it.
Yeah, welcome to the pit. It's gross, it's creepy, and honestly, it's kind of my vibe. Hope you like nightmares, because tonight's tale, it slithers.
Straight from the darkest corners of Reddit. Real stories, real fear, and just enough blood to stain your soul.
So at least grab your bed sheets. So grab a flashlight and maybe a therapist.
This is HorrorSlop. And now the first descent. One story to open the night. Just enough to crack the door and let something in.
All children believe their toys can speak to them. I just never grew out of it. I was engaged to a man in the city when I was young. It ended in tears, and when I moved back home, I knew I wasn't meant for that kind of life. So with a small loan from my father, I turned an abandoned storefront on Birch Street into a toy hospital. I was good at the work, good at sewing and oiling small gears. I could send a toy back looking brand new. I would whisper to them as I fixed them, and they told me their secrets right back. The usual, a teddy bear would come in with half his stuffing missing and an explanation of, we were just having too much fun. A doll with roller skates annoyed at being stuck inside. She wants it to stop but doesn't know how. Can you ask her to leave you on the stairs one night? She's quiet for a moment. Would having him gone be worth it? I found the newspaper article a week later. Found dead in his home, ruled an accident. A fall down the stairs. Most of the time, the toys I fix are brought in by their owners. Children. I know most of the people in town, so billing isn't a huge deal. My prices are fair. Only rarely does a parent bring in the toy. Mr. Markowitz was a science teacher at the local high school. He was a tall, thin man, with slightly too long hair and horn-rimmed glasses. He came in clutching the doll in his hands. It was Natalie's favorite. Susan doesn't play with it much, but I can't bear the thought of throwing away something she loved so much. I nodded. Natalie Markowitz's death had been a tragedy for the whole town. She had been the well-loved town librarian for years. No one knew what had possessed her to drive into the path of oncoming traffic on the highway that night. The library had been closed since. Then, in a lower, tired tone I would have expected out of a war veteran, Betty said, I can't do this anymore. I kept the shadows away from Natty for so many years. They would come out from the closet, and I would try with all my might, pull my own string and yell out into the night. It scared her sometimes, wake her up. She never saw the shadows scatter when I did it. She sighs. Hearing a doll sigh is a strange thing. It sounded as though she could use a good drink. Then she put me away, in the garage, where I couldn't even knew if they were still coming for her. When Mark brought me out, they had already gotten to her. I never considered myself a very religious woman, but I did believe. I believed as hard as I could as I brought my tools back out and opened Betty back up. The shadows might find you. I have an advantage. All the toys here, they all still tell me what they see at night. Then I fixed her dress, and went to call Mr. Markowitz and tell him the job was done.
You feel that? That weird pressure in the room? Yeah, that's the algorithm. It knows you're watching, and it gets real cranky when you don't feed it. A simple ritual helps. Click the little thumbs up, tap subscribe, say its name 3 times into your phone mic. Kidding, probably.
Engagement appeases the darkness. You know what to do.
Good, human. Now, back to the horror.
Part 5. Backslash. Backslash. It's been over an hour, no sound. I've tried the walkway door a few times, and try it again once more as I decide to move towards the grandparents' room, but no luck. I walk down the corridor, and reach their room. Holding the branch high, ready to swing, I quietly slide the door open. Candles are lined down the stairs, and I can tell from the dim glow that there are many more on the floor below. I tread down the stairs carefully, alert. Inside, the same symbol I had seen in Hina and the parents' room, the horn-like figure in the center of a circle. The symbol is everywhere, drawn in red all over the walls, the floors, the ceiling. At the end of the room, a small table holds a book. I cautiously approach it, opening the book, which reads from right to left. The book has drawings, 2 per page. Page 2, the woman is now in the village square, conversing with the children. The next image, they are following her into the woods. I turn the page. I jolt away from the book as I hear a child laugh behind me. A quick, innocent giggle breaks the silence. Almost as if the sound were the cause, the candles around me all distinguish at once. I plunge into darkness. Shaking, I stare across the room and out toward the staircase. I hold my branch high, ready once more to swing. I slowly walk towards the room's exit, and see a child quickly run into my view before disappearing up the staircase ahead. I edge out the room, my eyes slowly adjusting to the sudden dark. I am at the bottom of the staircase now, and turn my head to see where the child has gone. I look back up at the grandmother in terror. Her hands no longer cover her blood-soaked mouth, and instead stroke the hair of the young boy by her side. I take a step back. To my side, more people, young men and women, children, all looking at me. They look sad, frightened, and each have the symbol engraved into their chests. I back away from them as they begin to close in on me. I feel a door behind me and slide it open. It's the door with the red O. I turn to run, but grandmother stands tall in front of me. She puts her cold hand on my head, her large fingers wrap around my skull. She whispers something, and I fall unconscious. The family stop chanting. Almost as soon as this happens, I feel able to move. Adrenaline hits as Father Nomura kneels by my side to speak to me, his face close to mine. Finn, I hear Ren scream from below, she needs young life. Please. As I reach the front door, Hina notices the flames from across the walkway. She shouts something at her mother, and they both run to help their family.
Alright, quick break before our next story. Let's check in with our resident spooky dude. Hey, you ever smile, or is your face just stuck that way?
I smiled once. The sky bled. A child vanished. Never again.
Okay, drama. Maybe next time just try a dad joke.
Knock knock. They never made it to the door.
Wow. Fine, stay moody. Anyways, back to the darkness. This next one's got teeth.
Essentially, I ordered myself on the dark web. And number X200B. And number X200B. 1. Simple text post titled, Slayer's Assassination and Life-Ruining Services. In the text box in the post was what seemed to be just a random assortment of numbers and letters, ZY3 Kitkop 2Y3, for those of you curious. It took my tired brain a second to figure out what it was, but I realized pretty quickly. It was a link, presumably to a hitman website. And number X200B. There was a paragraph of white text on a black background, and a small box to the right of the text that just said, place an order. The text was the main part though, as it took up most of the page. It read, and number X200B. And number X200B. As I opened the door, he didn't hesitate to let himself in and shove a big baggie full of pot in my face. And number X200B. And number X200B. Cut to a couple hours later, it's early morning and Mark and I are chilling on my couch, both blazed as fuck. He suddenly decides to get up, and I assume he's going to get some leftover pizza, but he walks over to my desk and computer. Slayer's assassinations, are you gonna kill someone or something, he mutters. Your computer dude, it's got some hacker shit on it. And number X200B. I hopped up and walked over to my PC. Part of my brain was screaming no, what the fuck are you doing, but the majority of my brain, which was also the high part, was thinking about how funny it would be to order a hitman on myself. So I agree. I made him get out my chair though, because I didn't want him seeing what my credit card numbers were as I transferred some Bitcoin. And number X200B. And number X200B. I woke up around 9 AM, which meant I got at least 6 hours of sleep, even if it felt like I got 3. I got up and out of bed, threw on some track pants and a cotton shirt, yes, I sleep naked, and brewed myself a coffee before sitting down to play some games and just enjoy my Sunday. You can imagine how shocked I was when I saw that I had ordered my death the previous night. And number X200B. Even though I thought the site was bullshit, I still felt a pit open up in my stomach. Even when I'm high, I usually can make sensible decisions. I chuckled, not like I could remember it anyway, but I guess Mark's new shit really was good. And number X200B. I would assume a normal human being would do something else, but I was still kind of out of it from the night before, so I just carried on with my day. I was a little more paranoid, sure, but as I said, I just assumed it was bullshit. I even laughed at the email I got from the website, saying that their hitman has been dispatched and was on its way. It was like ordering a package of Amazon. I was tempted to email back and ask for some-day delivery. And number X200B. But I didn't need to ask, because that's exactly what I got. I didn't see it arrive, but around the time I started to cook myself a shitty dinner, I noticed a blacked-out sedan parked on the other side of the road from my house. I didn't live in a rural area, but there is a lot of trees and bushes between each of the houses on my street, so I would be surprised if any other house saw the car except for mine. And number X200B. Knocking on the window, nothing happened. It was rather anticlimactic. I was fully prepared to have to fight for my life, all because I did something really dumb while I was baked. But, like I said, nothing happened. I even put my head right up to the window, as if there was a reflection, to try and get a better look to see what's inside. I could barely see what was inside of the car, but all I could make out were 2 empty seats. No one was even inside. I had got all hyped up for nothing. I decided to wait out by the car for a bit, but after half an hour or so I was hungry and I had to go back inside to take my dinner out of the oven. I swear, it was only a minute between me going inside to take my dinner out of the oven and looking back out of the window, and the car being gone. I didn't even hear it go. And number X200B. And number X200B.
Whew, telling gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
We were pretty superstitious. All of us were. My mom, my dad, grandparents, and teachers. Neighbors, coaches, and bus drivers. We lived our lives by many traditions that might seem naive and old-fashioned at first glance. There is a simple reason for us having them, though. We all lived fine and well, obeying the communal gut feeling, and it never disappointed as long as we listened to our sayings. Not all of them sounded as inherently disturbing as the empty chair, of course. Some were just signs we looked out for. Others were little tricks that could ease your life. And some were, well, a bit disturbing, I guess. Like, if you lean over a railing, the devil will grab you and pull you towards the ground. As I said, there were many of those. Phrases they kept repeating so nobody will ever forget. And the one I've heard the most in my life happens to be the one about the chair. Dad repeated it every night like a prayer when I was still little. And Mum would come by later in the evening to make sure I had a backpack, some books, or even just a jacket lying on my desk chair. It was the only one in my room. As I grew older, they didn't need to remind me anymore. The phrase was deeply ingrained into my brain. I still heard Mum's footsteps at night, though. I suppose she wanted to be really sure nobody would be taking a seat next to me at night. You can never have every single member of a community obeying the same rules. Some people are inherently against going with the flow. Risk takers, show-offs, and adrenaline junkies. Then you have the ones who never listened much as kids and grew up not caring for old traditions. Especially when they read and watch all kinds of horror stories and start to realize that something isn't necessarily scary just because someone says so. I suppose many kids now just think that the whole saying is a way for their parents to make sure they keep their rooms clean. Because they all would regret it. I saw him getting his mail the following day. He looked tired and disturbed. He told me he kept thinking there was someone inside his home, but that wasn't possible. Nobody ever broke into a house around here. He told me he heard someone whisper in his ear to wake him up. When he looked around, he saw nothing but a jacket that wasn't there before, hanging by his closet. You know, it was probably my ma. That woman is anxiety personified, Billy joked back then. That was the first day. It lasted a week until his parents found him hanging from his bedroom closet. / Living in a big city was far different than anything I'd ever imagined. I suddenly had a sense of freedom I never perceived before. At first, it was overwhelming, all the places I could go to and all the things I could do, but after a while, I realized that this was exactly where I belonged. I found new friends, got a nice studio apartment, and a new sense of my own identity. It was still pitch dark out when I woke up by the sounds. It sounded as if someone was moving inside my apartment. At first, I didn't register much. I guess for a moment I forgot that I lived alone. When the realization came to me, my eyes opened wide. My heart started racing and I had to control my breathing. I checked behind the corner where my kitchen aisle, I checked under my bed and in the bathroom. There was no sign of someone being inside. Until I saw the coat rack. There was no response. A part of me wondered if I possibly dreamed it all up or if I mixed up the coat with one of my own, but in the end, I knew I was just lying to myself. Someone had been in here and it was my own fault for leaving the chair empty. / That night, I woke up by the sound of a whisper. The next day, I thought about staying with a friend, but I was afraid I might burden them with the same fate if it followed me. So I got a hotel room instead. Come with me. Your choice has already been made. The voice was omnipresent. It kept whispering and laughing until every moment of my life was drained in the color of nothingness. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I didn't feel. We were pretty superstitious. All of us were. We all lived fine and well, obeying the communal gut feeling, and it never disappointed as long as we listened to our sayings. I thought about that when every other thought in my mind stopped making sense. I thought about the things I was told ever since I was a child. The words that might even be able to help your life. It was a long shot, but the visitor was always polite enough to leave its shoes and coat by the door. I don't know how permanent the trick is, but last night I finally slept on my own again. And number X200B.
Still here? Aw, look at you. Brave little meatbag. Too late to back out now. Next story's already watching.
When I say drugs are fantastic, I'm not talking about the designer substances you find in a dark alley. No, I mean the amazing medications invented to cure anything from infections to psychological disorders. I say this as a person who's always had trouble sleeping. Not in the sense that I can't fall asleep, but rather that I need a whole 11 hours just to feel barely rested, a fact that absolutely does not fly in my line of work. Of course, it has its risk, and isn't something I'd recommend for your average Joe. I, however, was desperate. Months passed, and I tried numerous different substances, some which helped a little, while others just made it worse. In the end, I landed on a product simply called Nox. Using a P.O box, the medication arrived within a week. To my surprise, rather than finding a bottle filled with colorful pills, I just received the one, wrapped in a high-quality, expensive-looking package. Based on the forum I found it on, no one had experienced any adverse effects, so I stupidly ingested it with little hesitation, impatiently awaiting its results. Morning came, and yet I didn't need any sleep. The only thing I noticed was my skin seeming thinner, paler as if I'd fallen slightly ill. I initially felt suspicious of the pill, but my tired-looking facade could just as easily be explained by excessive amount of work. It wasn't as if I could stop taking the pills anyway, seeing as I'd only taken the one. It looked like an ulcer, a bedsore, but it was situated on my stomach just below the navel. It didn't hurt or anything, so I just put some cream on and waited, but it kept growing. Over the next few weeks my physical state deteriorated, and the doctors were baffled, yet I remained completely lucid. Even sedation for procedures had no effect on me. Once I'm done here, I'm putting a bullet in my brain, but I'm worried that even then, I'll have some sliver of consciousness to keep me awake as they put me in the ground, where I'll lay in darkness forever.
Anyway, let's lighten the mood with something fun, and... Nah, just kidding. It gets worse. Hit it.
Anyway, last night I was assigned to an auction at the Getty Center. Honestly, it was kind of plebeian compared to my usual jobs. The Getty, especially the Villa, is an insanely popular venue. With a little foresight and good financial sense, most middle-class workers can rent it. Typically, people in my employer's strata avoid things that regular people can obtain. I arrived a couple hours ahead in order to scope the place. Not that you can case the Getty Center, but I know how to spot law enforcement. They're usually the big concern, although my boss, let's call him Joe, did tell me to look out for people who change. I figured he was talking about troublemakers who dye their hair in the bathroom or some shit. Believe it or not, that's happened before. Which I did, for over 3 hours, like a kid in timeout. This happens a lot. People aren't exactly mindful of anyone they consider less important than themselves. While this applies to pretty much everyone, rich people take it to a transcendent level. First, to be perfectly frank, it was full of boring stuff, metal wall ornaments, contemporary-looking robes, and a scattering of what looked like old-school cell phones. Second, it didn't make sense spatially. My internal compass placed us somewhere behind the Sun King's ridiculous excesses, but the size and shape of the area looked like it couldn't possibly fit. He led me to a narrow staircase. We descended 4 flights of stairs that spilled us out into a concrete corridor. It stretched endlessly in both directions, but was empty except for security cameras and an industrial elevator. It was wider, and brighter, lit by warm lights that were almost indistinguishable from natural daylight. 14 recessed doors lined the hall. Only one was open. Pleasantly businesslike voices emanated from within. Anyhow, the room was nondescript, blandly sleek, with smooth white walls and recessed lighting along the baseboards and ceiling. It could have been any well-off company's human resources office. A handful of men and women chattered excitedly on the other side of the room. I can spot rich people as easily as I can spot law enforcement, and holy hell were these people rich. Several more trickled in over the next hour, until the little room was uncomfortably crowded. "What was that?" Harlequin asked. Sitting in there, seeing everyone's faces and having everyone see mine. The disrespect shocked me enough to glance up. His face was unsettlingly blank except for his eyes, which practically burned. I'd been wrong, they weren't blue, but a glassy sea green. He led us to the last door on the left. It looked exactly like all the others, but opened on a lavish, full-bore banquet hall that looked far, far too big to be in this corridor. A breathtakingly huge Persian runner spread from end to end, deep burgundy contrasting with the white marble floor. Polished black walls glimmered faintly under soft lights. A ridiculously long table dominated the room, already set for the coming festivities. An auction, followed by dinner. The organizer smiled and led us to a small, recessed doorway behind the stage. "Now, I know you've both seen interesting things in your time. No doubt you're both discreet. But I have to demand that, no matter what happens, you keep your fucking mouths shut." He smiled again. "Forever and a day. Are we clear?" The room was dark, cramped, musty, and foul. Whispers and strains of odd songs echoed off the walls like disoriented birds. He flicked on the lights, revealing rows upon rows of cages. Women, children, and men of all ages. Animals, too, many of which I've never heard of. The more I looked, the worse it got. A lot of the people weren't right. A cluster of toddlers were stuffed in a tiny crate, each sporting a pair of white, baseball-sized eyes. I thought several men were singing, until we came upon a five-eyed man with three mouths. A different melody issued from each pair of lips. I saw a woman had long, iridescent feathers for hair that drifted like kelp in the sea, and grinning little girl with a strange, squat body that reminded me of a frog. He closed the door. Immediately I felt 100 pairs of eyes on me, each stranger than the last. For the first time in years, I broke a sweat. He went on for several minutes. I strained to hear it all, but the earplugs were a little too effective. On top of that, his voice was annoying as hell, which made me want to tune out. The crowd filed out into the banquet hall, chattering and laughing among themselves. The organizer quickly shut the door behind them, leaving us in darkness once again. Immediately the normal people, the snacks, began to beg and scream. I hesitated for an instant, then pushed my earplugs in deep. The doctors did their work quickly, separating flesh and bone and sinew with expert speed. The boy was partially conscious for some of it. He moaned and wept until they reached his knees, after which he went blessedly silent. Finally, all that remained was a small pile. 24 pieces, maybe 30. One of the doctors knocked briskly on the door. The organizer opened it quickly and beckoned them out. He kept gesturing even after they'd left. It took a long moment for me to realize he was beckoning me, too. Mr. Harlequin and I had the epiphany at the same time, and strode forward in lockstep. We did as we were told. The doctors slowly rounded the table, setting a piece of the boy's meat on each plate. My stomach churned and I found myself praying, but of course it didn't work. They set a piece of bloody skin in my hand, and one in Mr. Harlequin's. I glanced at him helplessly. He stared back, looking as pale and horrified as I felt. His eyes had changed, I saw. Not blue, not sea green, but rich light brown. Almost amber. And his hair wasn't salt and pepper anymore. It was a brilliant auburn-tinged silver I've never seen before. "This is the final covenant," the organizer barked. "The only thing asked of you in return. It binds us all and it saves us all." He uttered a string of gibberish, then said, "Eat as one." My obedience wasn't even in question. I put the piece in my mouth and swallowed. Between it and the collective, wet click of 30 swallowing throats, I almost threw up. And that was the end. The buyers, including my boss, left quickly. Once they'd gone, the organizer shoved fat envelopes into my hands. "Remember. Keep that pretty mouth shut until the end of fucking time." He patted my shoulders, then gave Mr. Harlequin an envelope as well. "Thank you for your time and assistance. I'll be in touch soon with both of you." It's been almost 24 hours, and I don't know. But I have the terrible feeling I'll be doing it again soon.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite serves. Hope you're hungry.
When did they arrive? Maggie appeared through the blizzard like a ghost, her footsteps and profile having been hidden by the sheets of snow and ice falling all around us. I didn't jump, and once I realized she was looking at the cigarette in my hand, I merely nodded and offered her one. She surprised me by taking it and we stood quietly, eyes fixed on the spot on the horizon where we knew the ship was lying perfectly preserved. "I had HQ send a drone over with more appropriate supplies," I said. "So we're definitely staying then?" "Sebastian must be beside himself," Maggie replied, following it up with a quiet chuckle. "It's his shtick," I replied. "What he does." He only agreed because he thought we'd never find the damn thing, and it'd be 2 weeks of solid trekking through Arctic winter. But he has his own fundraising to do, and he needs to work up interest with littler treks like this one. Well, at least the new supplies are better suited to camp life. Plus, I gestured with the cigarette in my hand as it burned down to the final few embers, we can slip in a few little amenities now we don't have to haul every last pound behind us. "Why's that?" I asked. "Well, we've got the ship to explore for now," I said. "If Sebastian feels like it, he can burn off some calories checking out the second signal." I watched Maggie disappear back into the gray wind before returning to my own tent. Sitting down on my cot I contemplated the news she'd just delivered. My eyes drifted to the horizon again and again as I turned the words over in my mind. The ship was safe to board. The ship I'd spent years writing about, publishing papers on, researching. Hell, there was a scale model of the damn thing in my living room I'd made by hand as a young postdoc. It wasn't easy to open, taking maybe an hour or two. But all things considered, it wasn't as hard as it ought to have been. And when the door finally slammed open, landing on the deck with a terrible thunderclap, it revealed a set of steps descending into total darkness. At the sight of it, I felt a small catch form at the back of my throat. The rigging of this ship had been snapped, the beams and masts broken and gouged, the wood splintered. The Arctic is an alien place, the geography profoundly different to what we're used to. Great obelisks of glistening white rock rise meters into the air, walls of snow lie ready to collapse, and a landscape rendered in pure blank white appears to the human eye as faintly abstract, almost surreal. The ground is not solid rock, but floating ice, and below it lies one of the most hostile and unknown oceans in the world. An ocean that is forever ever cut off from sunlight. "Then you're as stupid as he is," Maggie said, stepping down onto the ice as Sebastian started to follow her. "If I hadn't wanted another cigarette I would never have realized you were missing. You'd have been trapped in there all night with that thing." Craig looked at Maggie and she nodded. "Let him," I said just as Maggie went to stop him. She rolled her eyes but let him go and Craig rushed off, catching Sebastian just as he took the final step down from the ship. The crew? I suggested. Shame we didn't bring any biologists with us. Your toys can help with that, right? Sebastian said. You've got drones coming and going so often we could set up a department store. We can take samples and return, maybe set up a video feed, Maggie replied. As a meteorologist, I definitely feel a little out of my wheelhouse. What about you? She asked me the last part, and I tried to think of whether anything I'd ever encountered came close to what I saw in the hold of that ship. When nothing came to mind, I shook my head. One fucked up Christmas tree, Sebastian said with a dark laugh, and I felt a shiver run down my back at his words. It really had resembled some kind of tree, and I filed the thought away in my head, hoping it wouldn't pop back up the next time I put my own tree up in my living room. Hey, he cried. Maybe you can hook the drones up to it and just fly the whole thing back to town. That reminds me, I said. Maggie has something to show you. I think you might like it. / We were told the worst thing to do was to touch or move it, so we didn't. The mountain of frozen flesh and withered bone was obscured from view with some makeshift curtains Craig threw together, and we carried on working like it wasn't there. Craig and Maggie took photos and made an inventory of every object we could find, carefully labeling and categorizing each tong and blade for later expeditions. I tried to pore through these items to find something that might give a clue to the ship's final fate. A dozen or so men crewed the ship in its prime, including a surgeon, a cook, a smith, and a cartographer. We found faded broken letters that spoke of mothers and wives, small figures sculpted from whalebone, and ancient bottles of homebrewed spirits stashed away under pillows. The ship's surgeon and resident scholar even had quite the collection of shells that he'd carefully labeled. Here and there we also found a patch of floor stained suspiciously in the dark, or a blade embedded in a door or wall, but we tried to ignore the implication of violence. There was a lifetime of work, and the details we captured guaranteed more funding than I could have ever imagined. We had our ghost ship, we had our thrilling and creepy details, and we had one great big inexplicable pile of corpses that would boggle some of the greatest researchers in the university. It was a little scary, but otherwise it was good news. Sebastian had departed the day before and checked in regularly for the first 12 hours or so. After that he went silent, which we put down to the poor weather or his general single-mindedness. At the 24-hour mark Maggie became a little itchy, and when she pointed out the silence to Craig and I, we found ourselves sharing her concern. We decided to try calling him on the radio and waited silently for his reply. What came was a discordant series of clicks and heavy breathing. Sebastian? Maggie asked. Are you okay? Sebastian? She cried. Please respond. We tried for hours until, eventually, his radio stopped returning any signal. Craig figured it may have died, or maybe Sebastian had turned it off and started ignoring us. But something about the strange noises had left us all feeling a little nervous. Maggie suggested that he'd just activated the radio by accident and we were hearing the sounds of his walking, but the breathing felt close and ragged, almost animalistic, like a man approaching death. Still, it was the best theory we had, and we agreed to wait a little longer. The following 12 hours were tense. Eventually we stopped working and returned to camp, where we tried to contact Sebastian with a more powerful radio and updated HQ to let them know. The ship that trailed us along the coast sent a few drones over the area Sebastian was meant to be and reported no visible signs of the man. No big surprise there, we figured, given just how hard it'd be to find anything in the tundra. But the pit in my stomach grew heavier with each hour that passed without us hearing back from our guide. I think it is, I answered. Maggie was on her hands and knees staring at the door that was no taller than my waist and embedded in a snowy banking. I reached out and rubbed away the ice and snow around the doorframe, revealing a wall made of crudely stacked slabs of wood as thick as my torso. We'll have to mark our path for the future, I said. And GPS tagged this whole area for full excavation at a later date. Maggie nodded and took the knife to add it to our inventory while Craig and I worked on opening the door. It took a little effort, but quickly popped open and swung inwards with a spine-tingling squeal. The building had a roof so low we had to duck. The beams above us were rough-hewn trunks with still visible bark preserved by God knows how long spent in the Arctic tundra. It was like a makeshift cabin, the kind of thing you'd find in the Canadian or Nordic wilderness. It had the sturdy appearance of Viking construction, and Maggie noted a few strange runes stitched across the inner doorway that I couldn't translate or properly recognize, but they seemed faintly familiar nonetheless. The room itself was a good 20 by 20 meters with a worktop that ran along 3 of the walls. Maggie shuffled over and picked up one of the stools that was tucked neatly under the countertop, and holding it up, she showed it to be no bigger than my forearm. "What the fuck?" she muttered. "I don't know what this is," I said. "But I'm not in on it, and if any of you are, I'd appreciate you saying now." "Sebastian, maybe?" Maggie said, a quiver entering her voice. She was holding up one of his shoes, the fabric half torn, and the inside splashed with still wet blood. "Maybe this is all his doing. He was assigned to us by the university." "Seems elaborate for a prank," I said. "We should work on the assumption that Sebastian needs our help. And if this is a joke, we can kick his ass afterwards." "Amen," Maggie replied, and together we walked towards the nearby stairs. Footprints were visible in the thin layer of snow that had drifted into the building over the years, and we knew that if Sebastian was near, then he must be somewhere below. "I haven't seen this before," Craig said. "This kind of material." "Fucking hell," he cried. "That's not all," Maggie said. "I think this is bone." She held up a small carving of the baby Jesus, no larger than my thumb, made out of a yellowing ivory. "Any guesses as to where it may have come from?" "Do you have any ideas?" Maggie asked, looking over towards me. I shook my head. "Maybe an old European colony," I said. "Someone came out here to try and... I don't know. Some religious fanatics maybe. Someone who wanted to recreate the myth." "What is it?" Craig asked. I turned to the toy he was staring at, its haunted face lit up by the intense beam of his torch. Its expression was remarkably well carved, seeming almost lifelike were it not for the obvious coloration of hardwood. The eyes, however, were far too human, and the iris a crystal blue that was, indeed, quite familiar. Unable to ignore his curiosity, Craig reached out and gently poked the glassy orbs. Only they weren't glassy. They were soft. And Craig's finger came away with a faint trickle of viscous fluid that lingered on his skin. He was alive for no more than a minute as we crouched there. He did not speak, no matter how often we asked our desperate and frightened questions. The only sense we got of what he was going through was the relief that passed over his face when he finally died, as if he had awoken at last from a terrible nightmare and was free of the terror. "I thought Nick was a saint," Craig said, wiping the snot and tears from his face after we'd all had a good cry. "If this is his workshop, it's a pretty fucked up place." "Sebastian might not be an option," I said, looking over the still steaming remains of his corpse. "I don't know about you, but I don't want to spend another second longer in this place. And as awful as it might seem, we have to weigh up our responsibilities to the dead against our responsibilities to the still living." "What are we going to tell them?" Craig asked. "We'll figure it out," I replied. "How long till the secondary team arrive?" Maggie asked. "A few days," Craig replied. "We could ride out ourselves using the snowmobiles, but I don't fancy my chances without Sebastian. Not to mention..." "It's going to be a long wait," Maggie said. "It is," I replied. "David," she cried. "Craig's gone. He's gone. I can't find him anywhere." "Let's hope he'd be wrong," I replied. I bent down and noticed the name tag etched with meticulous cursive. Wilkuma Geowinius, it read. "Welcome old friends," I said, doing my best to translate. "It's Old English." I pulled on the twine that bound the plain brown paper around the box, and the whole package unwrapped with elaborate ease. Each face of the box fell down one by one, and Maggie let out a terrible cry. It was Sebastian's head, his mouth stuffed with blood-sogged straw while his hollow eyes glared at us with terrible pain. "Craig," Maggie cried, her hands cupped around her mouth as she yelled into the open door of the Pinafore's deck. "Craig!" There were no more gifts lying in wait for us aboard the ship, and no sign of our friend on the deck. At one point I nearly told Maggie that he was probably in the hold, where it'd be safe and warm. But the words died in my throat. I couldn't keep clinging to such a hopeless idea. The hold was unchanged since we were last aboard. The pile of corpses entwined in a desperate orgy of violence still stood over everything else in the room. Something about the eyeless faces burned its way into my skull, and once again I wondered how exactly they'd suffered such a horrible fate. Maggie and I were silent in our search for Craig. I couldn't bring myself to cry out for him, and neither could Maggie. It felt useless, and some small part of me kept telling myself to stay small and quiet, hidden from view. "Don't call attention to yourself," it said. "Don't cry out." We checked each one of the ship's rooms, every quarter, every hold, every cupboard and closet. Until at last we both converged on the captain's quarters, and our breath caught in our chests as we noticed the door wide open. Craig's clothes were in a pile, a few meters past the threshold. The strangest plan formed in my head. I can't say how or why it came to me, except that in the end it was probably the only that saved me. The pile of corpses, as horrifying as it was large enough to allow entry in some places. One place in particular came to mind. A small nook, barely large enough for a person. But I went for it, sprinting into the room and crawling on my stomach backward so as to slide underneath the mountain of rotten bodies. The feel of ice-cold fingers sliding along my trouser leg, hooking on pockets and poking my chest and back, was enough to nearly make me cry out. And when one of those fingers broke off and lay resting on the back of my neck, turning moist and clammy from the warmth, I had to fight to keep myself from vomiting. I was in there for 2 days and eventually hypothermia got the better of me. By the time the second expedition arrived and pulled me out, screaming in terror when I'd first cried out at the sound of their voices, the bodies around me had started to freeze to my skin. It tore away like duct tape, leaving long stretches of black necrotic flesh lying beneath. 2 fingers on my left hand were gone, 2 on my right. I still have respiratory problems and my remaining fingers have lost all but the most basic coordination. Which, at the very least, has put an end to my smoking habit. I received a gift, a plain wrapped box with a familiar twine wrapped around it in a neat bow. It was small, far smaller than the one that had contained Sebastian's head. And it opened to reveal one of my missing fingers, quite likely left behind when they tore me out of my frozen tomb. I thought it would stay there, a little piece me locked forever in that nightmare hole, frozen stiff to the side of some medieval sailor. There was even a little tag. "Yao Winstre des, Geowine." The word sent shivers down my spine. "You left this, old friend," it read.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
Half curious and half disturbed, I put down my fork and asked, "What do you mean you watched me for 3 days? What do I have to do to make the money? How do I know you even have that much money?" I scooted away from him and pushed the meal away from me. He started to speak again, but I held my hand up and told him to let me think. I know. Money isn't everything, but this was an opportunity for me. Probably a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I knew the probabilities pointed to an early grave for me, but I just couldn't lose this chance. A chance to finally prove to my family that I was fully self-capable. I woke up and felt a small pain inside of my ear. Once I managed to stand up, I rubbed my eyes and looked around. Within a couple of seconds, I knew I was on a plane. There were 2 other guys and 2 women sleeping on their chairs. I sat back down on my seat and stared out the window. I noticed that it was the morning now. We were descending, but all I could see was the ocean. After a couple of minutes, the plane started to descend quickly. I looked out the window and saw an endless amount of trees. As the plane started to quickly go down, I sat back in my seat and braced myself. I was completely convinced that we were about to crash into the trees, but as the plane touched down on the ground, I saw that we were in a small clearing. The plane came to a stop and a door opened from the back of the plane. Elijah came out and walked to the front of the plane. I looked around and saw that everyone else was awake. He looked at all of us for a second before saying, "All right. Let me see if I can remember. Jared, Blake, Cody, Allison, and Elise. Did I get that right?" We all nodded and he smiled before continuing, "Okay, follow me out of the plane and I will lead you guys to your room. The contest starts tomorrow. We have a computer for each of you to use. You can call out for help if you'd like to, but it won't help. You see, we are now on an island that is not traceable. Plus, if you get found you won't win the money. So, the nights are your time. The daytime is entertainment time. Your only objective is to not be the last one to finish the challenge. The last one to complete the challenge will provide our lovely viewers with whatever they request. A chance to either prove myself or die." Right as the next clip came up, I heard Cody yell out, "Fuck that. What the fuck? You show pussy ass shit for everyone else. Why the fuck you show me doing this shit?" I looked back at the screen and saw Cody speaking to an old woman. They were laughing together while sitting on a park bench. She handed him a picture and I saw Cody's face instantly turn sour. He started to yell at her and grab her by the shoulder. She tried pushing off of him, but he then put his hands around his throat and started to squeeze. She tried to get out of his grip, but she became still and he let go of her throat and ran away. The screen zoomed in on the picture. It was of Cody, the woman, and a man. "I love you, son, but please know that your daddy loved you just as much." Cody slammed his laptop shut and started to scream at us, "Don't fucking judge me. I loved my mom, but she always backed up that filthy bitch. He fucking did shit to me, man. He didn't love me. He was a piece of shit." I saw Cody's eyes glance down at the screen and he started to scream. The man on the right nodded his head and grabbed a rusty spoon from the table behind him. The other man held on to Cody's face to keep it steady while the other guy scooped his eyes out. The next message said, "I want you to cut off 3 of his fingers and shove it down his throat." The man put down the spoon and grabbed a kitchen knife. While the other man held on to Cody's hand, I looked away from the screen. The sound of bones crunching vibrated my eardrums. I looked back at the screen and saw Cody's scream halting and changing to gagging as 3 of his fingers were shoved down his throat. "I'm not asking for help. I know I will probably die, but I want to finish this out. That is why I am not posting this on my Facebook or alerting anyone I know. People are paying 50 grand to watch this, but I figure I might as well entertain you with the written version." For day 2.
You're still tuned to HorrorSlop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
Buckle up, boys and girls. My buddy and I just experienced some grade A creepy shit while on a trip to Red Rocks in Colorado. I write a lot of things down anyway, and so I figured I might as well post the story here and see what you guys think. The drive was going to take about 24 hours, so we decided we would drive until about midnight after we got off work, find a place to crash, and finish the drive the next day. I immediately hopped onto Airbnb and started looking for somewhere cool to stay. Remember what I said earlier about being into the slightly creepy? Now, in my book, this is an Airbnb no-no. But the place seems so cool, and it's so cheap, and, what can I say, I was feeling spontaneous. So I booked it, strict cancellation policy be damned. I mean, you can't beat $15 per person. We would play rock paper scissors to see who got the bed when we got there. A couple weeks go by and the day of our trip finally arrives. We both get off work at 4 and meet up, already packed and ready to go. We knew that the trip from Tampa to Sequatchie would take 8 hours, so we didn't waste any time getting on the interstate. Honestly, the drive up there was pretty uneventful, so I will spare you the details. By the time we make it into Tennessee, it's approaching midnight. When we get off the interstate and head toward the address, it's dark. It doesn't get this dark in Tampa. Apparently the town of Sequatchie isn't overly concerned with things like streetlights. The cell service finally dwindled to nothing about 15 minutes after getting off the interstate. Surprise, surprise, but John was smart enough to screenshot the route beforehand so that it wouldn't be lost. 5-star wingman there, ladies and gentlemen. We continue up the driveway, if not with a little more skepticism than before. It wins on 4, I shit you not, 12 minutes through some mountainous territory. At times the grade became serious enough that I thought I might have to put my 4Runner into 4-wheel drive. My car continues the turn and the house is once again obscured by darkness as we make our way around the perimeter of the field in front of it. I remember John saying something along the lines of, "What the fuck have you gotten us into?" as we pulled to a stop in front of a massive old willow tree that served as the end of the driveway. It looked like some ancient sentinel in the semi-darkness. The house stands about 30 yards away from the end of the drive. I notice with relief that it does have electricity. At the side door, there is one of those old-fashioned yellow light bulbs casting a sickish glow onto the surrounding bushes and the sidewalk leading to the driveway. I turn off the car and try to lighten the mood by saying something my grandfather always used to say. Home again, jiggity jig. At this point, my creep meter was quietly pinging at around a 6 out of 10. Just on the threshold of uncomfortable, but not quite there yet. Definitely not Motel 6 uncomfortable. Come on John, where's your sense of adventure? I say as I swing my door open and hop out. My feet make a scrunch sound as they meet the gravel and I'm immediately struck by how loud the sound of the summer bugs is. The instructions said check in whenever, the key will be under the mat. The air that blows out as the door opens is stale. It smells like air that has been sitting still since the Paleozoic era. I need to be clear that it doesn't stink, it's just thick with the smell of disuse, if that makes sense. John gestures for me to go first, so I do. If I'm being honest, I think at this point my creep meter had probably edged up to a 7. Still quiet, but now a more pronounced pulse. Still not Motel 6 uncomfortable. The place just felt so empty. He's looking over my shoulder now. I snap my head around in the direction of his gaze. I just saw something moving out there. I swear. Just past the edge of the woods. If the crayon hadn't done it, John's outburst had. I was officially Motel 6 uncomfortable. Let's get out of here. You're right, we can find another place to stay. Sleeping in the car would be better than this. John is 100% on board. We make our way out of the kitchen and let the door slam, no longer worrying about being quiet. I'm actually jogging by the time we get halfway down the sidewalk, my backpack bouncing awkwardly. John beats me back to the car and I see his shoulders slump as he slows down. That's when the screaming started.
And now, as the hour gets cold and the shadows stretch long into the corners of your room, it's time.
Yeah. Chew the spooky violin. But seriously, this next one? Even I didn't sleep after hearing it.
I've claimed something coming from you.
What? Just because I sleep in a coffin and collect cursed dolls?
Among other things. This is the final descent for the night. One last story, dragged up from the depths of the disturbed and deranged.
Go ahead. Turn off the lights. We dare you.
This is HorrorSlop.
My girlfriend wears too much makeup and now I think I know why, by Genuinely Grim. We've been dating for almost a year now. I'm attracted to her, of course, otherwise I wouldn't have asked her out. However, this issue has really put a significant amount of strain on our relationship. It can't be good for your skin, I told her. But she'd only pursed her lips and ignored me for the rest of the day. I started thinking that perhaps there was more to this than meets the eye. It seemed like she had an extreme phobia-like condition of being seen without makeup. I thought that perhaps she'd come around if I made her feel like she was beautiful without it, but it didn't help. I was going to take her makeup off. Okay, maybe not all of it. I didn't want to run the risk of waking her up in the process, but I truly did want her to see just how beautiful she was without it. I mean, at this point, something had to give. I raided my mother's bathroom cabinet for some cleanser and cotton pads and then snuck into the bedroom, carefully shutting the door behind me. My girlfriend was lying on her side and even from the foot of the bed, I could see orange makeup stains on the white sheets. I walked around to her side of the bed and perched lightly on the mattress. Then, I wet the cotton pad and lightly dabbed her cheek with it. Nothing happened. I wiped a bit harder. I could see the makeup coming off on the pad, but her face looked exactly the same. I took out another pad and continued the process, wiping the same area over and over. Then, I saw it. But the more I rubbed, the more apparent it became that it wasn't acne at all. It was rugged. Fleshy almost. It looked like under her makeup, my girlfriend didn't actually have any skin at all. I stared at it, my own skin prickling. What was that? It looked like flesh and muscle fused together, like one of those educational mannequins with their face split in half. Suddenly, my girlfriend shifted and opened her eyes. I could see panic in them before she even had a chance to speak. Touch, what? That, she exclaimed, gesturing to the patch on her face. Caitlin. I yelled after her. She returned within 2 minutes, clutching a kitchen knife. Whoa. I exclaimed, what's that for? Shut up, she commanded, which hand did you touch it with? My eyes must have been like saucers. Alright, how long ago? Her eyes widened. It's too late. Your whole arm must go. What the hell is wrong with you? I yelled at her, you can't cut my arm off. She looked stern. I have to, Tom, otherwise the infection will spread. What infection? What on earth are you talking about? I slept on the couch that night, or well, at least I tried to. I couldn't wrap my head around what had happened. I'd never seen my girlfriend so riled up before, she would have cut my arm off without hesitation. I could still hear her bawling upstairs. Only about an hour later did she finally quieten down and go to bed. In the morning, I went upstairs to my bedroom to let her out. I wasn't sure what to expect, so I armed myself with a knife of my own just in case she decided to pounce and decapitate me as soon as I opened the door. But that didn't happen. In fact, my girlfriend was sitting on the edge of the bed, facing the wall. She didn't even look up as I walked in, but I could see she'd reapplied her makeup on the side of her face. Nothing. "I don't think this is going to work out," she finally said. "What? Why?" "You're not trustworthy," she retorted, surveying me. "You knew I didn't want to take my makeup off, and yet you did it anyway," she said. "It's over, Tom." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "I only wanted what's best for us. I didn't know about your problem." She smiled sheepishly. "Yeah, well, looks like it's your problem now too," she said, getting up to leave. "Oh, and Tom, you'll need this." Huh. I flipped the bottle in my hands. It was foundation. What was I meant to do with this? Keep it as a fond memory? I chucked it into the bin in my room and made my way downstairs for breakfast. I'd heard my parents clattering the plates in the kitchen. As soon as I stepped into the room, however, my mother dropped one onto the floor.
And there you have it, dear listeners. One final scream, echoing into the void.
Yeah. Void screams, eternal darkness. I did it. Can I eat now?
We're still on air, Roxy.
Oh no, just the spooky FCC is gonna haunt us for breaking the mood.
If you enjoyed tonight's descent into depravity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and what does he always say?
Stab that bell icon like it's your ex possessed by a demon, and leave a comment telling us what story made you question. I have choices.
And if you survive the night, we'll be waiting.
Same that time, same that crypt.
You're the reason we have complaints, you know that.
You're welcome.